Not much longer to go. I hope everyone's excited. I just want to say, look, it gets really stressful, especially if you're doing practice exams and you're getting your marks back, and you're getting the ones and the twos and maybe the threes. And the way to look at it is to not use that as a negative experience, but to use that positively, and to make sure that you reframe yourself, that this is an opportunity for you to get better, and to look at those questions where you've scored, the ones and the twos, and to actually go back and rework your answer and send it back to the examiner to see and go, look, would this be a better way to write the answer? Okay, welcome to episode 20, which is the environmental effects of anaesthetic agents. This was a challenging question. And so thank you to Marajay from New Zealand for suggesting we do this question in the 2020 paper. And yes, definitely worth it. So for those who are new here, the way we're going to break down the short answer question is we're going to go through the exams report. And then after that, I will go through you the key literature which the question is based from, present key concepts, answer any questions you may have, and then we're going to create an answer structure and write an answer to time. Now, this is the 2020 question 8 paper in the second half of the year, which is discuss the adverse environmental effects of anaesthetic agents in current use. And what I've realized over the last couple of years, there's a common theme actually with how the examiners are running the reports. So no longer are they writing the concepts, which are scoring you a pass mark, and the other concepts which are scoring you a good pass or an excellent mark. But now they're sort of giving you a broad sort of framework in terms of how to answer the question. So this follows along the lines of what I've sort of seen over the last couple of years in terms of how examiners are producing their reports. So the question required a basic knowledge of the terms greenhouse gas, ozone layer, and global warming. An explanation of how inhalational agents affect the wider environment, and things that were done well or done particularly well were ranking of agents by degree of impact. And the most obvious would be Desflurane here, acknowledging the large amount of non-recyclable solid waste produced, and mentioning the adverse effects of nitrous upon theatre staff. So those 3 points, I think we can include that quite easily in our answer, but we do need to make sure that we expand on those concepts as well, making sure that we include all those key terms that the examiner wants. So greenhouse gas, ozone layer, global warming, and really sort of expand on those concepts, which can actually go in quite a bit of detail as I'll go through. Now, things that were done poorly, accurately differentiating between the basic terms and understanding the effect of propofol on the wider environment. And with regards to the wider environment, I think it just goes beyond the non-recyclable solid waste. And you can look at it in terms of the CO2 production related to its life cycle assessment, as well as to its environmental impact as well. But those two concepts are not too difficult. And hopefully when we go through it, you can see we can just add a couple of lines to discussing the environmental impact of propofol. And most of this question will actually be based on the effects of inhalational agents. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that this question has come from the position statement on environmental sustainability in anesthesia and pain medicine practice. So ANZCA PS 64, it is actually one of the professional documents that is quoted for the fellowship exam. So there is a learning objective tied to this statement. But what we're going to focus on is really the environmental impact of anesthetic agents, whereas The fellowship one requires an understanding in terms of how we manage those environmental impacts. Now, these are the key articles that ANZCA PS64 references, or in actual fact, these are the 3 key articles. This one here, I've just included because it's the latest article, so 2021, and I've just provided it just to show you a broad overview of some of the concepts and how you'll see a wide variation of ranges, okay, with those numbers. And I guess we have to come to a consensus together in terms of what numbers are we going to include in our answer. Now, the goals for today is we need to understand what the environmental impacts are, and those can be broadly divided into 4 key concepts. So the ozone layer effect, the radiation and greenhouse gas effects, the environmental hazards, and occupational hazards. The really big one is going to be radiation and greenhouse gas effects, which can be further subdivided into global warming potential and carbon dioxide equivalents, as well as the life cycle assessment. These 2 here will be based on volatile agents. The CO2 equivalents and life cycle assessment will be based on IV induction agents, primarily propofol. And if you are really keen on a mnemonic, as you can see here, we have one already created, okay? The Oreo cookie. So the ozone layer effects, ozone, the radiation and greenhouse gas effect, the environmental effects, and the occupational hazards. All right. Now, we're first going to start off with the ozone layer effect. So these are based just on inhalational agents, and it involves the catalytic destruction of the ozone layer. So the ozone layer is, it's O3, and it's designed to absorb the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Now, the destruction is measured by what's called the ozone depletion potential. And the 3 inhalational agents you need to know about are nitrous, halothane, and isoflurane. So in other words, it includes all halogenated agents with a chlorine in it, because chlorine creates free radical catalysts, and radicals are they're atoms or molecules with at least 1 unpaired electron. And so the halogenated agents with chlorine are halothane, isoflurane, and N-fluorane. Sevoflurane and desflurane do not have chlorine in it, so they are not implicated in the ozone layer depletion. And the way to rank them is halothanes first, which is more than nitrous, which is more than isoflurane. The key points to make with this statement here is that halothane is rarely used in Australia and New Zealand at the moment. It's probably used quite a bit still in third world countries, although I think its use is getting less. And isoflurane has an not extremely short lifespan, but has a shorter lifespan because sevoflurane's lifespan is the least. So isoflurane has a lifespan of approximately 3 years. And that's compared to nitrous, which is about 120 years. And we'll go through the lifespans on a couple of slides after this, okay? Now, volatile agents, they absorb infrared radiation and radiate this energy, causing the greenhouse gas effect. So this would be the statement that I would add under point number 2, which is the radiation and greenhouse gases. And this is measured with what's called the global warming potential, or GWP. And this accounts for the lifespan of the agent, and it compares it to the same mass of carbon dioxide over a specific time period. So you'll see different numbers produced. So you see GW20, which is the global warming potential of that agent compared to CO2 over a 20-year period. And same with GWP 100, it's over a 100-year period. Now the question is, which one do you use? Do you use GWP 20 or GWP 100? So when I wrote an article on this that got published, I used global warming potential 100. And that would have been my go-to one. But PS64 has used this. So I think that this GWP, so the global warming potential over a 20-year period, is the one that we want to use, just to be consistent with what is published by ANZCA. Now the lifespan. We do need to know this approximately. We don't need to know it accurately. And I'll show you a little picture card to sort of remember this, okay? So nitrous is 120 years. Desflurane is 14 years. Isoflurane is 3. And sevoflurane is 1. You don't need to be accurate on this because I will show you a slide which they have variations of the lifespan of these agents. So I think being approximately around these numbers is safe. Now, we've talked about the global warming potential of the agent, and we've also talked about the lifespan. What needs to also be considered is the amount of agent used. So the concentration dialed and the fresh gas flow. And this is important. It's important because what it sort of allows you to conceptualize is that, and I'll show you this on a table, nitrous actually has the lowest global warming potential out of all the agents there. But it's implicated in terms of being the most pollutant because of this factor here, because of the amount of agent that's used, because of the concentration that's dialed. So nitrous, it's traditionally used around sort of 50, 60% of your fresh gas flow. And you think about that, you know, when you think about sevoflurane, you're only dialing up 2%, or isoflurane, which is 1%. Sevoflurane is probably the best example of the most modern anesthetic agent that we use, so that's about 2%. And the fresh gas flow. So fresh gas flow of nitrous that is often used is also around 2 liters as well. And the way that it's going to be measured is through what's called carbon dioxide equivalents. So what they term as CDE for short, or CO2 equivalents. And again, you can describe it over a specific time period. So you can have carbon dioxide equivalents over 100 years, carbon dioxide equivalents over 20 years, and that's the one we're going to use, CDE 20, just to be consistent again with PS64. So that the carbon dioxide equivalent 20, this is the formula. It's the amount used, which is the grams per hour, multiplied by the global warming potential of the agent, and that equals your carbon dioxide equivalents. Now, I don't think you don't need to know the carbon dioxide equivalents, but you do need to know the comparison, and I'll show you which ones are important to know. There's a lot of them, and we're just going to pick a few that I think is going to highlight the differences between the agents. Now, this is the comparison here, and you can see why it's so confusing or why there's so much information to know. All right. The key point is we need a point of reference. So the point of reference for us all should be 1 Mac of sevoflurane at 2 liters per minute. Now you're going to ask, or you're going to say that, oh, look, you can run 1 Mac of sevo at 1 liters per minute or 1 Mac of sevo at half a liter per minute, and absolutely agree. In fact, that's what I do in my practice. But we do need to acknowledge that the product information for sevoflurane recommends that you do run it at 2 liters per minute. And so therefore, any comparison should be based on this recommendation. So 1 Mac of sevoflurane at 2 liters per minute is equivalent to 1 Mac of isoflurane at 1 liters per minute. And this is talking about the carbon dioxide equivalents. The key one I want to point out is going to be this one here. Okay, so running 1 Mac of DES at 1 liter per minute. And this is the one I want you to remember. So the numbers quoted is that it's 19.5 times less than 1 Mac of desflurane. In other words, 1 Mac of desflurane is 20 times more than 1 Mac of sevoflurane at 2 liters per minute. Okay, so if you were running your 6% of desflurane at 1 liters per minute, you would produce 20 times more carbon dioxide equivalents than if you were to run 1 Mac of sevo at 2 liters per minute. And you can see that the maths that goes from here to here are just multiplications of the fresh gas flow. So in other words, if you double your fresh gas flow to 2 liters per minute, you're going to double this from 19.5 to 39, or 20 to approximately 40. And if you halve your fresh gas flow, halve your fresh gas flow from 1 liter to half a liter, you're going to reduce this from approximately 20 to 10. And then this is the other thing that I think they quite appreciate, is when you think about it in terms of driving a car. So the equivalent of running 1 Mac of DES at 1 liters is equivalent to driving at a speed of 350 kilometers an hour. So the other way that you'll also see it presented is that if you run 3 hours of desflurane at 1 Mac at 1 liters per minute, it's approximately the equivalent of driving 1,000 kilometers. And I think that's quite a nice one to add into our answer. So if you can remember this somehow, and this is what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to incorporate the idea that we are going to be running 3 Mac hours of DES, and that is the equivalent of driving approximately 1,000 kilometers. Now, this is the nitrous number. So they don't actually give you a comparison because often nitrous is often used with a volatile agent. But what they do say is that when you use 60% nitrous at a fresh gas flow of 2 liters per minute to deliver 1 Mac hour with sevoflurane, it increases your carbon dioxide equivalents by about 6 times than if you were to use sevoflurane by itself. So in other words, if you were to run 60% nitrous plus approximately, so 60% nitrous is probably about 0.5, 0.6 of a Mac. Okay, so you could probably run a percentage of 0.8% of sevo. So 60% nitrous plus 0.8% of sevo would produce 6 times more carbon dioxide equivalents than if you run 2% sevo. Okay, so this is at 2 liters per minute. So there's a lot of numbers there, and I think if I was to highlight this in red, this would be the key one I'm going to remember. And this one here is also a good one to remember as well. Now, this is what I call fact checking. So this is the joys of not having an exam. The pressure of an exam coming up is that I can actually spend the whole week looking through all the references that have been referenced on PS64 and making sure that the numbers that is presented there is consistent with the articles that have been referenced. Because you certainly don't want to be talking about these numbers and then after having the examiner go, but hey, it's different here. So this is to help you appreciate where the numbers have actually come from. Now, this is the key, one of the key paragraphs. So we've got the lifespan here. And in this paragraph here in PS64, it says nitrous oxide has an atmospheric lifetime of nearly 120 years, whereas ISO has a lifetime of 3.2 years, Desflurane 14, and SIVO 1.1. This is the first key article that PS64 references. So it's close, but it's not quite there. Okay, but this is what I was talking about, is that it's okay to have a variation in terms of the lifetime, as in you just need to be approximately there. But this was the first table that I saw that I went, you know, PS64 actually quotes very specific numbers. It didn't give a range. It said 120 for nitrous, 14 for DES. So 120 for nitrous, 14 for DES, 3 and a bit for ISO. I think it was 3.2 and 1.1 for SIVO. So these are pretty much the same, but these are a little bit different. Okay, so when I saw this, I realized that, okay, PS64 probably hasn't used, even though they've referenced this article, they probably haven't used this table for their numbers. And this was in Anesthesia Analgesia 2010. So which one, so where do they get their numbers from? Now, the other things that PS64 writes is that at 2, 1, and 0.5 liters per minute, the carbon dioxide equivalents in a 20-year period of desflurane is 39, 19.5, and 9.8 times higher than sevoflurane at 2 liters per minute. And so I think you can round that off to 40, 20, and 10. And remember that, 40, 20, and 10. And remember, this is the one we want to remember, okay? So that at 1 Mac of SIVO at 2 liters per minute, that is 20 times less than 1 Mac of DES at 1 liters per minute. Ooh. Apologies about my screen here. There we go. Okay, so 1 Mac of SIVO at 2 liters per minute is 20 times less than 1 Mac of DES at 1 liters per minute. And then the thing that they write is that Ryan and Nielsen demonstrated that addition of 60% nitrous to a fresh gas flow of 2 liters per minute and over 1 Mac hour with sevoflurane or isoflurane increased the global warming impact by 590% and 290% respectively. Again, I can see why, you know, I'm so sympathetic to you guys out there, because you can see that the numbers are presented in so many different forms. Do you see this? 509, this is presented as a percentage. This is presented as a times. Like, it'd be so much easier for you guys, I think, you know, if this just said 6 times and 3 times more. It's exactly the same thing. But I really am so sympathetic, because what happens is that you see these numbers and then often you just look at it and you have to memorize it. But what I think that you don't have the time to actually appreciate that this is what it's actually meaning. And so there's other comparisons that are also made, and I think that, you know, for symmetry, always just have sort of one way in terms of comparing it, one agent to another. So I'm just going to use by factors in terms of by factors of whole numbers rather than percentages in my answer. Now, this is the Ryan and Nielsen. So this one, Ryan, so they've quoted Ryan and Nielsen here. And this is the Ryan and Nielsen article. And what I want to point out is this table here. So this is the comparison of global warming impact of frequent use inhaled anesthetics per Mach hour at use of various fresh gas flow. And this is our comparison agent. So 2% of SIVO, in other words, 1 Mach of SIVO at 2 liters per minute. And that's our base comparison. And these numbers here are different than the ones that are being talked about in PS 64. So PS 64 said that this was approximately 10 times, or 10, yep, this was approximately 20 times, and this was approximately 40 times. But you can see here that the ratios here are different. And this bugged me. I was going, why is it that PS 64 has this statement here, has referenced number 3, which is the Ryan and Nielsen article, but yet the numbers here are not consistent with this table here. The nitrous one is fine. So the nitrous of 5.9 to 1 and 3 to 1 for ISO. So that's okay. So this one we can tick off. Okay. So in other words, using nitrous 60% with SIVO 0.8% at 2 liters per minute produces 6 times more carbon dioxide equivalents than if you were to use SIVO alone. Okay, so 1 Mach hour at 2 liters per minute. So these numbers are good. These numbers are fine. But it's the other ones that I had to reconcile. So how were the values, where were they derived from? And this is where I'm going to show you why there is a variation in terms of the values that are being published out there. Okay, and just to be aware, so that if you do talk about the numbers which are referenced in PS 64 and a examiner or a consultant brings up another number, I think it's important to acknowledge that, yes, there is a wide variety of numbers out there, but the ones you have quoted are the ones from PS 64 as published by ANZCA. And this is the other one I want to talk about, which is the amount of volatile use. So this is pretty consistent. I don't think there's any argument on that we understand that this is the amount of drug used. So 2% of sevoflurane at 2 liters per minute produces about 20 grams per hour. And then the other one is 6% of SIVO at 1 liters per minute produces 25 grams per hour. And then the calculation to calculate your carbon dioxide equivalents is to go grams per hour multiplied by your global warming potential equals your carbon dioxide equivalent. So this is the formula here. Okay. And what I've realized is that these numbers here are different. When I say different, as in the numbers that the authors of PS 64 have used are different than the ones that Ryan and Nielsen have published. And so the question is, where did they get their numbers from? And they've gotten their numbers from this article here, from Anderson and Nielsen. And this was in Anesthesia Analgesia 2012. And so the things that you can see here are they've got Desflurane at 14 years, which is correct. Sevoflurane at 1.1, ISO at 3.2, which is correct. And nitrous was 114. I think the article had 120. But these are the numbers that they've used to calculate the carbon dioxide equivalents. So they've used the amount, which is from that previous table, amount of agent used, multiplied by the GW, global warming potential 20, which then equals your carbon dioxide equivalent 20. And these are the numbers here. And yes, I think that if you can remember them, it would be amazing. And I'm going to show you a little trick on how I'm going to remember it. And hopefully that will allow you to help you to remember as well. Okay. But yes, there is, I know it looks random, but I did find a pattern between them. Okay. Excluding nitrous, I did find a pattern between SIVO, ISO, and DES. Now, the other interesting about this table is the ozone depletion potential. So as you can see that halothane is number 1, and nitrous is number 2, and then enflurane and isoflurane are 3, and desflurane and sevoflurane, which has no chloride in it, they don't have any ozone depletion potential. And this is the carbon dioxide equivalent. So I've just used, what I've done is using the global warming potential from this table here by Anderson. I've just used this formula here. And I've just done all the calculations, and you can see that that has proved that these were the numbers that the authors used for their article. All right. So you don't need to memorize these equations. This is just a proof that the global warming potential 20, the numbers that we need to memorize are the ones from Anderson, as per PS 64. And this is the one here. Okay, so 1 mech of DES at 1 liters per minute produces 20 times more than SIVO at 1 mech hour at 2 liters per minute. Okay. How are we going to memorize lifespan? This is how I memorize it. So nitrous, I'm not ageist by any means, but nitrous would be used by probably one of the older anesthetists. And therefore, that's how I remember that nitrous is 120 years old or over 110 years old. DES is like a teenager. So DES is approximately 14 years old. ISO is like the terrible 3s. So ISO is going to be 3. And SIVO is a little baby. All right. And I don't know whether you remember this little baby here, but that was the same little baby that produced itself in the pulse oximetry slide. And he was also 1 year old. He was also a one-year-old there. Okay. So that would be the memory trick that I would use. Nitrous, very old, older anesthetists use it. So it's 120 years old. DES is like a teenager, 14. ISO, terrible 3s. And then SIVO's little baby. So that's 1. How are we going to memorize the global warming potential? Now, these are the rules of 4s for this. So sevoflurane is 440. Isoflurane is 440 multiplied by 4. Now, if you struggle to do the multiplication, so what happens is 4 times 4 is 1600, and then plus 4 times 4 is another 1600. So that equals 1760. Okay, and that's approximately 1800. And then again with DES, you multiply that by another 4. So you can multiply 1800 by 4 again. Okay, and then what you get is for DES, it's approximately 7,200, but you can write it down. It's approximately 7,000. Okay, and that's pretty close to the 6,800 number that was published in Anderson. So understand sevoflurane is 440. 4 times that is approximately 1,800. 4 times this is approximately 7,000. And if we go back here, you can see 440, multiply this by 4, you get approximately 1,800 or thereabouts. And then after that, you multiply that by 4, you get approximately 7,000. So the only exception is going to be nitrous, and that has a GWP global warming potential of 289. And then I've just rounded it off to 300. Okay. So these would be the numbers that I'm going to be trying to produce in my paper. And sorry, in my short answer question. Now, finally, I've just put in this table, which was the article in 2021. So this just summarizes the lifetime of nitrous as well as the halogenated agents. And as you can see, there's a range. So I don't think it is important to be accurate, but you do need to be around sort of around that around the ballpark. So in other words, nitrous is going to be over 100 years old. Desflurane, teenager. Isoflurane, little toddler, and Sevo is a baby. So old, teenager, toddler, and a baby. And again, this is another summary from this 2021 article, which shows that halothane, isoflurane, and nitrous are ozone depleters. So remember that halothane is 1, nitrous is 2, isoflurane is 3, and that all of them are greenhouse gas. So in terms of their global warming potential, okay, DES is the worst. So DES is 1. The second one is going to be ISO. Third one is going to be SIVO. Fourth one is going to be nitrous. But the way that we're going to build on that concept, okay, is the idea of carbon dioxide equivalents, which is both a function of the amount of the percentage dialed up, as well as the fresh gas flow. And when you do that, you'll find that nitrous actually becomes a lot more pollutant. Now that is pretty much all of volatile agents, and there's quite a lot there. So because I've gone through so much there, I know that in my answer, I'm probably gonna have to write a page, at least a page on that. And to make sure that when I set up my answer, I do leave a page for that. And because it's my second it's going to be my second topic, what I'll do is I'll probably start it in the middle of the page and then start the third one, which is the environmental impact. In the adverse environmental effects. I'm probably going to start that either on another page, probably on my third page. Okay, but I'll show it to you when I show you my structure. Now, this is the environmental impact related to the life cycle assessment. And what we're going to do now is we're going to think about in terms of IV induction agents, and we're going to try to convert it to carbon dioxide equivalents. And there's 5 things associated with the life cycle assessment. So there's the manufacture, the packaging, the transport, the energy and materials for drug delivery, and also the environmental impact of unused drugs. So this can include both the landfill that's required for any non-recyclable materials, such as syringes, and then the cost of incineration of solid contaminated waste or restricted drugs. So things like opioids need to be discarded and incinerated. Now, if you struggle to think about those 5 things, I want you to think about it sort of conceptually. And the way that you can think about it is, first of all, propofol needs to be manufactured. So this is to do with the life cycle assessment. It needs to be manufactured first. And then after that, it needs to be packaged. And then after that, it needs to be transported to your hospital. And after you transport it to your hospital and you want to use it, you need to think about the energy and materials required for drug delivery. So you need electricity, you need a TCI pump, you need a syringe, you need the minimum volume extension tubing, and you might need some needles, some blunt needles to draw up the propofol. And then finally, you got to think about all this waste here. So these are non-recyclable. And then you also got to think about the cost of incineration. And so you don't need to always incinerate glass ampules or syringes, but they do need to be thrown away, and they go off to landfill. The things that you do need to incinerate are anything that is contaminated or anything that contains restricted drugs. So in Australia, those would be Schedule 8 drugs. In New Zealand, I'm not sure how they're classified, but I think a nice way to phrase it is that they just need to be restricted. Now, this is really interesting because despite all those things we talked about, so the manufacturing, the packaging, the transport, the energy and materials for drug delivery, the environmental impact, all this, when you think about that for propofol, it only accounts for very minimal in terms of the greenhouse gas emission. So it's approximately 10,000 times less than desflurane or nitrous. And this would be a key statement to put in. And I think if you read PS 64, I think they've used another term for comparison. I think they've used, they've used the term 4 times the magnitude. And that term just essentially means 10,000 times less than desflurane or nitrous. Now, this is, I've just summarized this, but I probably won't include this in my answer, okay? Because I think there's quite a bit to write already. So that drug waste does increase the environmental impact related to its life cycle assessment. Propofol accounts for 45% of all drugs wasted. And the strategies to consider in terms of waste management are reduce, reuse, and recycle. So the way that we reduce drugs are pre-filled syringes, and it's also been shown using smaller propofol ampules. So using the 20 mils rather than the 50 mils has been shown to reduce drug wastage. Reusing is hard. So splitting of ampules are not recommended due to risk of drug errors and infection, and that's a professional guideline, PG 51. Recyclable. So you can think about recycling a lot of the glass ampules there, but it does get tricky because of if they contain any controlled drugs, it makes it difficult. And also the technology to recycle volatile gases and nitrous is currently not readily available. So this is more for I think I've just included this just to complete the summary of PS 64, but don't put this in because this doesn't actually answer the question. The question was asking about the environmental impact of anesthetic agents, not how to mitigate the environmental impact of anesthetic agents. This one I will include, environmental hazards. So, the hazards. So the hazards can be divided into environmental hazards and occupational hazards. And you can see quite nicely, this is points 3 and 4. I would probably just put this on the last page. Not much to write here other than to say that propofol, local anesthetics, and ephedrine are toxic to aquatic life. And the occupational hazards is primarily associated with long-term exposure to nitrous. And you can, there's numerous ways to phrase this, but I've just summarized a little paragraph from the article in Anesthesia Analgesia in 2021, which is that it creates genetic damage and oxidative stress, which leads to miscarriages, congenital abnormalities, cancer, renal, and liver failure. And look, the causation may not be strong enough, and you could probably write something like associated. Rather, there may be an association, okay, rather than a causation. All right, everyone, I've got my stopwatch here. Everyone's going to be riding along with me, and we're going to be answering the 2020 B8 question. Discuss the adverse environmental effects of anesthetic agents in current use, and hopefully you've had that 1 minute to write all those key points there. So we're going to go from there. All right, ready, and let's go. So environmental effects include 1, catalytic destruction of ozone layer. 2, radiation and greenhouse gas effect. I'm going to leave quite a bit for this. I'm going to go straight to here. It's my 3rd page. Environmental hazards, and 4, occupational hazards. Okay, so I'm going to say that this is measured by the ozone depletion potential and halothane more than nitrous, more than isoflurane, rarely used in Australia, offset by short lifespan. So volatile agents. What I want to do is I want to talk about volatile agents as well as intravenous agents. So for volatile agents here, and over this page here, I will need to talk about intravenous agents. So volatile agents absorb infrared radiation, radiate energy back, creating greenhouse gas effect, measured by the global warming potential, GWP, counts for lifespan of agent. So nitrous, approximately 120 years. There's approximately 14 years. ISO, approximately 3 years. And zero, approximately 1 year. And then after that, it compares it to the same mass of CO2 over the same period. So GWP 20. There's approximately 7,000. It's more than ISO, it's approximately 1,800. It's approximately more than SIVO, which is 440. It's more than Nitrous, which is approximately 300. Calculation must also include amount of agent used based on fresh gas flow and concentration. Gout measured as CO2 equivalents, CDE, over a time period, and 1 mech of DES at 1 liters per minute produces 20 times the CDE 20 of 1 mech of SIVO at 2 liters per minute. 3 mech hours of DES at 1 liters per minute equals 1,000 kilometers of driving, and using 60% nitrous plus 0.8% SIVO produces 6 times CDE 20, so at 2 liters per minute, produces 6 times more CDE than 1 mech SIVO at 2 liters per minute. Okay, so IV agents. So the CDE is related to its life cycle assessment, which is based on the manufacture, packaging, transport, energy, and materials for drug delivery, and E, environmental impact of unused drug, includes landfill for non-recyclable materials such as syringes, and cost of incineration. But despite all this, propofol produces approximately 10,000 times less CDE than DES or nitrous. Right. Environmental hazards. So propofol, local anesthetics, and ephedrine are toxic to aquatic life, and long-term exposure of nitrous is associated with genetic damage and oxidative stress, leading to potentially miscarriages, congenital abnormalities, hepatic and renal failure, and cancer. All right. That's about 9 minutes and 10 seconds. And I back through it. Would I add anything else? Got pretty much all I wanted to write here, actually. So I'm pretty happy with that. Well, I should have like a heart rate monitor as well to show you what my heart rate is.